Test, test, test. We're going to see if we hear. Test, test, test. Let's see if we hear. All right, we'll get started in just a couple of minutes. All right, we'll get started in just a couple of minutes. All right, so I think most of you guys can hear it now, so we'll wait a couple minutes for people to get logged in. Sorry about that. Sometimes the Google Hangouts audio just decides not to work, and there's no way to kind of restart it on the existing page. So if someone could go back and tell some of the other people that we're going to get started here in just a couple minutes. Apologize for inconvenience there, but so this time we're going to be doing kind of a special talk just on HALion 5. Generally, we do a lot of kind of Q&A type of functionality where we just kind of have questions, but we had some requests for people that wanted to. I'm going to turn my audio down on my other laptop. So one of the things that we want to do is actually just... Okay, so we'll go through a couple of the questions. I see some of the questions coming in. If you guys want to introduce yourself again, so I'll just go ahead and type the message. All right, so we have a question about eliminating sustain pedal to the virtual keyboard. So we can go ahead and take a look at that. It's good to see you, Sir Robert. Greg, good to see you, okay? Okay, I'll kind of adjust my gain structure. I can't really hear it too well here. Hopefully that'll be a little better. I'll try adjusting some things here. Let me know if that sounds a little better for you guys, and we'll get started in just a couple minutes. So this time, as I mentioned before, we usually do, kind of a lot of different Q&A scenarios where you kind of just ask any questions. And we had some people that wanted to see a lot of functionality just on HALion 5. So we wanted to kind of take a more detailed look at HALion 5. So we're going to be doing that tonight. So we see a couple questions like about sustain pedal. We'll go over that as well. But we'll wait a couple minutes. If you're watching this live, you may want to fast forward just about 5 minutes or so, and then we'll get started. All right, good to see Charles from the UK. I think you've been on again. Greg McCarty from Portland. It's good to see you. And Sir Robert. All right, nice to see you again. All right, so we'll get just started in just a couple minutes. So we're going to kind of just take a detailed look through a lot of the different aspects of HALion 5, and it's an incredibly deep program. And if you want to do, almost anything with synthesis or sampling, it can really cover it pretty accurately and pretty much in depth. So we'll go ahead and take a look at it and get started in just a couple minutes. And if you have any specific questions, please feel free to go ahead and ask on HALion 5. We will be doing later in a month. I haven't picked a date yet. We will be doing kind of the general Q&A as well. So if you have like questions on any Steinberg, whether it's HALion 5 or Cubase or SQL or Nuendo, Wavelab, whatever, we'll be doing kind of a general Q&A. But we want to do kind of a special session for HALion 5. And if someone gets a chance, if you want to go back perhaps to the old link and kind of let people know that we're on the new link here. Sorry, sometimes the audio just decides not to work on the Google Hangouts, and there's no way to kind of reset the Hangout other than kind of starting a new Hangout. So I see most people kind of have made their way over. So we'll just kind of wait a minute or two and see if people are kind of working their way over. So I apologize for the inconvenience. Okay, so I guess we'll go ahead and get started. When we take a look at HALion 5, HALion was actually the first VST sampler that was created back in 2001. I think the HAL in HALion was kind of a 2001 to film reference originally. And we're kind of in our 5th generation of it, and it's really become a powerhouse VST sampler. So not only do we see it running as a standalone application, we also have it working as a VST2, a VST3, and 3.5 plugin. In addition to that, it also works as an AU plugin on the Mac platform. We can have 64 different MIDI channels inside of when we take a look at HALion here. So we have 64 different MIDI channels. I have 27 kind of indicated active in this particular project here. And basically it'll show up as 16 channels on bank on port A, B, C, and D. Now the interface is quite unique in a lot of ways as well. So if I wanted to actually just kind of come here and get to the point where we're seeing, I just want to make sure you guys, I'm just going to wait a second and see if the screen is kind of showing full screen here. Hang on just one second. I may have to adjust something in my Google settings here. Hang out. Just want to make sure we're seeing the full screen. I apologize again. We'll see if this kind of kicks in here, because what I'm seeing kind of on my screen doesn't have the interface showing up. So we'll just take a look and see if we see the interface popping up here. Okay, so I think you guys can see everything now, so sorry about that. All right, so as we mentioned before, it's going to be 64 MIDI channels in one program. If you need more than 64, you can just simply open up a second instance. Some of the things that make the actual user interface unique is that it's completely scalable, so whatever kind of screen resolution that you're working on, you're able to kind of have it automatically fit your different screen. And you could have different portions of the window here. So one of the things that's going to be kind of unique about this is the fact that we can come over here, and each window I could actually kind of split if I wanted to undock or create a tab. So if I wanted to undock a particular window, I could actually just literally undock it from the plugin and place it anywhere within my computer screen that I wanted to. Or if I just wanted to eliminate particular screens. So we can see that. So it gets to be kind of very easy now. Each of these can be set up kind of as a screen set as well. So if you wanted to, you could open up new windows, or you could actually load and save different screen sets. So we could have our default set, or if I wanted a very basic screen set, or if I wanted to come over here, and again, you could just have different kind of screen sets set up. So I can say, okay, I want to see an advanced screen set, or if I wanted to. So very easy to kind of, again, navigate and have the screen configured kind of exactly as you want. Now, when we wanted to come over here, we could see by going to the MIDI tab here, we could assign our different MIDI channels here. So we could see our MIDI channels 1 through 16. So if I had two different sounds loaded up and I wanted to layer these programs, say program 1 and 2, I could literally just put those into the same MIDI channel. So again, we can have our 64 different voices. We can restrict polyphony on each of the tracks here in each of the programs, as well as do transposition, and you could set a range. So if you only wanted these keys to respond within particular keys, a particular range, you could do this graphically, or if you wanted to just kind of take this and just adjust the range, you could do that kind of that simply. Now also you could say, I didn't want this voice to come in until this velocity range. So you could actually just kind of grab your velocity range, and this voice won't come in until it's a velocity of 57. So if you wanted to layer like a piano and strings together, you could just simply come right there and adjust that range, or you could move that range, or just kind of choose there. Now you can also come here and restrict controllers. So we had a question, I think, in the other Hangout session about, or maybe this one, about limiting sustain messages or different controllers. So if you didn't want a particular MIDI continuous controller to lock up here, you could just simply choose to filter that out. So again, once we're in our MIDI section, we could just come right here and we could see kind of our key range and zones and velocity and transposition, as well as our velocity range and controller filtering. Now, a lot of the things that you'll see will kind of have different tabs that have a kind of an interesting hierarchy. So if I wanted to just simply come over here and we wanted to load particular sounds, I could scroll down to, let's say, an empty program, and I could choose kind of different instrument sounds. So if you kind of click here, we could look at your browser, but if I just simply click directly here, at this point we could see kind of all the instrument sets, or if I just wanted to load up sounds from Bebox or Dark Planet, which is an add-on expansion, or my HALion 3 content, or Trip, which comes with Cubase, or the HALion Symphonic Orchestra, which we'll take a look at for some of the mapping, Haliotron, World Instruments. I could do that. Or if I just wanted to actually look at it by browser, and this kind of mimics the media bay settings. So once we start here, I can say I wanted to have a synth bass, and now I could see all of my synth basses regardless of what instrument they're actually coming through. Now you have a little area here that you could actually type in. So right here between kind of the filter sections and all the names, you could actually just say, I'm looking for something that has jazz in the name. And at this point, it'll just automatically find anything that has different the letters jazz. So you can kind of search for particular sounds, like, okay, I'm looking for synth bass or lead or pad. And you'll see all these kind of broken down by category right here as well. So you can say, okay, I want this to be synth pad. And then you could go through and just easily audition all of your synth pads right there. Now, as we kind of look at different programs, one of the things that you may notice is as you come over here that you'll have kind of different hierarchies. So kind of you think of the program as kind of being the container for all of the different sounds. And then we have different layers, and each of those layers can have different zones. So we can think of the zone as kind of the fundamental aspect of the sound, whether it's a synth sound or whether it's going to be an actual sample-based or an organ oscillator. So all these different elements here. So we can think of the hierarchy as going program, layer, and then zone. Now, one of the things is, you may notice, I should have probably mentioned this earlier, that a lot of the programs that we actually see inside of Steinberg products have like HALion. So you have HALion Sonic SE, which you could think of as the starter edition. And then we have kind of the HALion Sonic, which is going to be more of a synth workstation, and then the full HALion. Now, most of the sample-based instruments, whether it's Groove Agent or the Grand, are all kind of playing back. Pad Shop is another example, are all kind of playing back through the HALion engine. So that's why we see the name kind of used so much within Steinberg products. So, every copy of Cubase comes with HALion Sonic SE. If you needed more capabilities, you could upgrade to HALion Sonic. And if you wanted to actually kind of create your own sounds, we have the capability of creating your sounds within HALion as well. So we'll go ahead. I'm just going to look through some of the quick questions that come in. Make sure, is everyone hearing it okay and seeing everything okay? We'll just check if you guys want to leave a comment. Okay, so we'll go on. Now, one of the things that we wanted to do is, we can give you a tremendous amount of capabilities within a particular sound. So if I wanted to select one of my sounds and edit it, we can kind of go on and on for different zone mappings. We can also just have a plethora of different options. Now, one of the things that HALion 5 brought to the table that was really unique was the capability of actually having macro editors. The first one we'll look at is one, and when we go to load up different instruments, if I click on my load tab, we can see these macro editors come up here. So I have like the Neo Soul Keys that comes, that's an incredible Fender Rhodes, or the Trip, which comes with Cubase 7.5, the Model C, Voltage, Triumph, World Percussion. So these are kind of really specialized user interfaces so that if you're not so tweaky or technically oriented, that you don't have to go through and actually, edit every particular sound and zone manually. So you could still do that, but that may not be kind of someone's idea of fun if you're just kind of looking for quick sound. So the first one we're going to look at is Auron. And Auron, we could think of this as being very similar. It's going to be a granular synthesis. So within HALion 5, some of the things that were updated from the previous version of the HALion 4 were actually set up so that you had either samples or synthesis. So there's actually 2 additional oscillators that have been added for organ sounds and the granular sounds. So when we see the Auron here, we could actually just, if we play just a couple of voices, you hear it's kind of really ethereal sound. So hit it really up high. So what this is doing is basically taking a number of different just taking a sample, and instead of being able to deal with the sample in its kind of own form, what we're able to do is, if we wanted to do some more editing on this, we could just kind of scroll down so you can see our kind of different LFOs, we can see our zones, but we also have the grain oscillator. So this would allow us to do a tremendous amount of editing, and basically, if we were to think of granular synthesis, is basically going to be taking the individual sound and breaking it down into thousands of little pieces, and then being able to synthesize that and to be able to kind of change the sound of that. So with this, if I wanted to actually just listen to the particular sample here, I believe we can now look in our directory tree here. So we're going to go right down to where our sample is, and then I'll just choose to edit and edit the sample, and we'll play. And this is kind of what this sound is actually made of. So it's 1 piano note. So now that we kind of have taken it into our different grains, if I wanted to change the position of that grain or the number of grains, we could come here and really just kind of take something that was really kind of, a very simple sound and be able to have all sorts of really interesting sounds from that. So, it's not going to create it's not intended to create the perfect cello sample or something like that, but if you wanted to come up with really kind of interesting and ethereal sounds, you could come over here. Now, if you don't want it to edit at this level, you could again just go to your macro view. So if we wanted to, you could say, okay, let's look at our synthesizer page, and we also have an arpeggiator page here, which we could look at in more detail. So what Auron is going to allow you to do is to kind of take existing samples, and you could just drag and drop your existing sample in here and be able to change the sound so that it kind of can break apart sounds and bring it into additional input sounds to get really interesting results. The next one we're going to look at is one called B-Box. And as we actually kind of look at our different tracks, one of the things that's kind of interesting is as I would select different tracks in Cubase here, we would see that the actual instrument would automatically just switch over to the appropriate editor. So these two will always be in sync with each other. So if I wanted to go to a Model C or to my HALion, that HALion is automatically synchronized directly with this. Now B-Box is going to give you hundreds of different drum kits, and it's really intended to be a traditional beatbox. So it's going to have all sorts of, and again, all sorts of different kits, and we're going to see kind of the classic drum programming grid here. So we see 16 steps, and you could change the amount of steps by going to the little arrow on the lower right hand side. So if you wanted to just come right there and see the 16 steps, you can change that. So if you want it to be in 7/8 time or 6/8, you could just kind of change your patterns. Now, as I wanted to come here, I could play this, and this would automatically synchronize with the tempo of my project. So if I wanted to change the tempo, that's automatically just synchronizing with the tempo of your existing project. So if I wanted to add additional sounds, now what's interesting is I could actually take my kick here and we see different sounds. So if I wanted to switch my sound, I could just take my mouse wheel here and I can scroll through all my kicks. So you start it with one kit, you may want a different kick sound or different snare. Or you could just type in a number. And if I want to take my kick here, I could solo the kick. And if I wanted to adjust the tuning, so I'm just going to come right here and I'm going to select a kick, and now I could adjust. Or if I wanted to adjust the decay, so if I could listen to that in context. Or if I want a really short decay. So if I wanted to come here, I could also just run like the snare through different distortions. So we have 4 different distortion types: tube, you have hard clips, bit reduction, rate reduction. So at this point, if I wanted to just run the snare through more distortion, you could also do some interesting things like, okay, I just want to take this pattern here and reverse the pattern. Come up with different results, or say, okay, I just want to shift the pattern. Over by 16th note. So if I have my snare selected here, I could actually go into my mixer page. At this point, I could say, okay, I just wanted to adjust the panning of the snare. Or if I wanted to add more delay or reverb. So I can now go to my aux sends here, and I can say, okay, let's go to my delay, and I want the delay, and we could synchronize our delay, and let's say to be, we'll do 8th note delays. So now as I go back to my mixer, we can have more reverb. And I could also send it to different outputs. So we're going to have 32 stereo outs, as well as 4 aux send outs and a surround output. So we can have a tremendous amount of capability here to be able to kind of shape the sounds. And if I wanted to go to a different pattern, I could just click here and we get 8 variation patterns as well. So if I just come here, I could go to a completely different pattern. Now, if I really wanted to change the feel of this particular pattern, I could actually start off with and if I have a drum loop here in Cubase, one of the things you could do is if you go to the sample editor in Cubase, we could go to hit points. And as we go to the hit points, I could just say, okay, we're going to go to our hit points tab. We'll set our threshold. And then I'm going to say, let's create MIDI notes. And I could put these all onto a new track. And as I kind of scroll down in my project here, I can see my new MIDI track. And if I wanted to take the feel of a particular drum loop, I can now just kind of go over here to the aux send, and I can say, okay, I could just drag and drop, and I could match the feel or the groove of a particular MIDI event directly to the pattern here in Groove Agent. So I could kind of drag and drop grooves, but I could also drag and drop patterns. So we see this little MIDI indicator light. So if I wanted that pattern onto my project window, all I had to do is just simply double click, and at that point I could just have that pattern directly inside of my Cubase project window. Now, many times people worry about having to constantly start and having it synchronized, but you could actually have it automatically follow your different performance. So if I wanted to come here, you could have different restart mode options where you could say, okay, I just wanted to have this follow the transport. So as soon as I hit play in Cubase, my B-Box would automatically synchronize with it, or I could sync it to the host or the first note. So plus you're going to have kind of all your different swing, delay, different reverb options here, master, volume. So quite capable for doing, and of course you could use kind of any sounds with this, with and I think you get over 200 different kind of electronic and hip hop dance kits with this. So it gets to be very comprehensive for that. Now, our next instrument that we're going to look at is going to be the Model C. So again, one of the things that was added was kind of an organ oscillator. So we'll go ahead and just kind of play a little bit. So if I wanted to kind of look at what's going on behind the scenes, all I have to do is come over here. And we can see this is our oscillator here. So if I adjust, and you can think of these as like the tone wheels on the organ, or if you want to see it in kind of the pretty macro editor, your mod wheel by default will control the Leslie speed. So if I just want to So if I wanted to adjust my tone wheels here and everything, I could just right click to learn the MIDI continuous controllers. I could adjust the attack, the release, the velocity, how much of the amplifier is dialed in, your key on or key off click. So if I wanted to go through a couple of different organ sounds, I could just go to load and say I want to go through my Model C presets. And as I wanted to go back to my macro editor, I could come right over here. And if I wanted to just adjust the rotary speaker, kind of like your Leslie speaker, so your microphone angle, if you wanted more treble, more drive, less drive, more bass, how fast the Leslie is spinning. We also have different amplifier sections. So, one of the things is you have a whole slew of plugins, so about 40 different plugins. So if you want to run it through the VST amp rack, we could turn this on. And then we could add different effects. So if you wanted to have ring modulator or phaser, delay, and reverb. And again, these can all be tempo synced as well. So if you're looking for like a really, pretty phenomenal tone wheel organ, the sounds, and there's just, hundreds of great presets with that. So I see a question that had come in about, does the automation tie directly into Cubase? So you can just simply click on the read write here, adjust the parameters, and you could graphically edit it in Cubase as well. So very easy. Or if you're using different MIDI controllers, you could just right click and learn the MIDI continuous controller so that you could have any number of external MIDI keyboards controlling it, doing all the drawbars and everything. So very, very easy to automate all your different parameters. So you could automate the tracks or just automate the plugin itself by clicking on W and R in the upper right hand corner here. Now the next instrument that we wanted to take a look at was going to be HALion. So if we wanted to look at this, and this is kind of the recreation of kind of a classic mellotron instrument, and you've heard this on countless records. And it was kind of a poor man's string section if you didn't in the 70s. And if you're not familiar with kind of the history, this is actually one of the first samplers that was ever available. Because what it actually did is, you would play keys, and the keys would actually trigger recordings of different sounds. So you had different choir sounds, or different choirs, strings, some brass sounds. And you could have 3 different banks. So it was kind of not the best situation, but for a lot of people that needed to have a string sound and maybe didn't have a budget, it was a great way to kind of achieve that. So again, what it would actually do is, every time you hit a key on a keyboard, it would actually play an individual recording for that particular key. So it's kind of like an analog sampler, and obviously the more it was used, the more the tapes got worn out. So we've heard it on countless records, even like the Beatles' Strawberry Fields Forever, like the little flute sound. That was, where you hear a lot of string sounds. I remember Peter Frampton telling me that on his hit record, I'm in You, that, he and a keyboard player were sitting there recording the mellotron sounds, to kind of get by with the orchestra and stuff. So we'll go ahead and take a quick listen to what the HALion sounds like, so you will kind of get an idea. You'll bring back a lot of memories. So I'll just go ahead, and that wasn't the right sound, so we'll just come here and we'll just play this. And just mute this. So let's just start this again, sorry. So if you want to switch between, and you had 3 different tape banks, but now you could actually kind of morph between those 3 tape banks. Now if you want it to be like half speed, to drop it an octave. And plus you could adjust your attack, filter, decay. So kind of all of your different sounds that you'd expect from a classic mellotron, you're able to achieve very quickly there. And plus you're going to have, what the original mellotron didn't have was kind of an entire filter section, so you could adjust, again, resonance. So, just trying out different sounds. So if I want to go back, and we'll just play this particular part again, and I'll load up, let's say, maybe a different patch where we can say, let's go to our HALion, and then kind of, I think there's a pretty good one of the Strawberry Fields flute sound. So these are like really pretty painstakingly recreated, so you have kind of all the characteristics. We'll go through a couple other presets here. A lot of Moody Blues records, stuff like that. And voice sounds. So very, very authentic attention paid to detail, so that you can actually kind of capture a lot of those classic sounds with the HALion. Now, I saw a question, I believe it was referring back to the drum patterns. Can you start by playing your MIDI keyboard and latch on? So if we go back to your B-Box, and then we come here, you can say to restart mode, you can just start it with the first note, and it will just kind of latch on right there. So I believe you just set it to first note, it will just continue to kind of latch on. Yeah, and I see a comment that it's very kind of King Crimson sounding. That's another group that used the mellotron very extensively. Our next one we'll take a look at is kind of a bit of a departure from some of the instruments. And you can see there's just a really kind of wide variety of instruments, but we could take a look at some of the world sounds. So we'll start off with I'll just kind of put this into a loop, and we could start off here. So we have two different kind of world instruments, and we'll start off with our composer's harp. So a lot of the instruments have built-in arpeggiators as well. So I could just kind of come here. If you hold a chord, you could actually kind of switch between different arpeggiation patterns. So I'm just going to put this into a quick loop, and we'll just kind of play this, and we'll loop it a couple times. And for a lot of these patterns, you can say, okay, I want this to be, eighth notes for the arpeggiators. So you have different tempo scales for the arpeggiators as well. So I'm just going to look at this one here, and we go to our arpeggiator. And let me just set the locators here. Sorry about that. Just going to take off my virtual keyboard just so you can hear the arpeggiator going on. So we have the composer's harp here. So I can say, okay, I want this to be more 16th notes or 8th note triplets. And then you could have all your different triggering modes for next beat or restart directly immediately, or different key modes. And you could also pick two different types of controllers. So if you wanted to do panning or different types, or cutoff or resonance of the particular sound, you're able to do that. So now if I wanted to add a different voice in, let's say our flute sound. And one of the things that's really cool about different world instruments is the ability to have different tuning scales. So you could actually turn on, and you can have half tones tunings here on particular notes. And the last one we'll look at in kind of the world instrument is actually going to be using this in conjunction with our world instruments here. So we could have a world percussion sound. And what this would allow us to do is to actually be able to audition kind of different world percussion instruments. So we could come here and try out kind of a whole slew of different instruments. So I could say, okay, let's just load up this preset, and we could play. And again, I could have different variations. So if I wanted to kind of play this with that percussion as well. So if I wanted to even try out different types of, percussion, I could just come here, and again, I could choose my scale. So I could say, okay, let's make it more 16th note based. So all these different ethnic percussions. And what's kind of cool is you can say, okay, I want more Celtic. We'll say we'll make that. And you do have the ability to actually take these and mix and match the different styles to different sounds. So you could have kind of a Celtic sound playing back through maybe more of an Asian percussion sound. So it gets to be very, very creative for what you could do with that. And again, just like really nice textures kind of add on to particular projects. Next, we'll kind of look at a couple of the different synthesizers. So we'll start off with Trium here. And Trium is a 3 oscillator synthesizer, so it's a really very beefy, aggressive synth sound. And one of the things that gets to be, and again, we're going to have the arpeggiators that we see here, so you'll see kind of, a lot of the same ideas for controls, but again, kind of a more macro view. So we'll go ahead and just kind of listen to a little bit of the Trium here. And all these sounds are just coming from Trium, kind of using the built-in arpeggiators as well. So we'll just kind of start off. So very, very rich sounds. And the next one we'll take a quick listen to will be the Voltage. So we want to listen to Voltage here. And again, as soon as we kind of look at the particular instruments, you could see this is going to be kind of based on kind of very Moog style of interface as well. So we'll come here and just kind of find a little preset song that we have. So I'll just put this into a loop so you can hear. It's really kind of deep basses. So very, very easy to kind of have like those classic virtual analog synthesizers as well. And again, if you wanted to really go in and tweak, everything will kind of be built right in. So we go to our synth section, we can see that we're going to have, in this patch, we have 2 different oscillators, but if I wanted 3 oscillators, and I could have a multi-oscillator option here to kind of make it sound even thicker. Plus you're going to have your sub-oscillator plus you can have ring modulation and noise kind of all blended together with very extensive filters. And again, you can have kind of multi-pole filters. You can morph between your different filter options here. And then also kind of extensive modulation matrix capabilities as well. So your envelope, so you can choose whether you want, this to be your amplifier for your filter, for pitch, or a user setting here. And plus you'll have all of your LFO sections, and you could actually just kind of pick and choose what components you see by clicking right here in these tabs. So as you kind of start off, you can see your different LFO sections, and if you want to go to your step modulation, and then excuse me, and then going directly into your modulation matrix, you're going to have kind of all that capability built in. Now you can kind of tweak and edit every one of these different options as you see fit here, and we could go through our tabbed options here. or you have the ability to kind of have the macro view where you can have a lot of this functionality in kind of a traditional user interface. So it gets to be, very simple to kind of deal with it if you wanted to kind of deal with it at a more macro level or more kind of nuts and bolts level. So our next thing that we'll take a look at is going to be our drum player. So as I wanted to kind of just start off a particular kit here, one of the things that we have is different kind of MIDI modules, and you could actually kind of pick and choose all of your different windows that are available here. But if I wanted to go to edit, and we have kind of MIDI modules, we have a flex phraser, which we'll look at next. But one of the MIDI modules that you can add is a drum programmer. So again, what's kind of cool about this is we see kind of like the classic drum grid that you would expect. So if I just wanted to kind of play this particular pattern here, we can just take it here. So we see kind of all of our different settings. We have our drum grid laid out for us here. So we see kind of our 16 steps. So, and again, as you wanted to just kind of come here, we could play a particular pattern. So, and if you wanted to, you could solo individual notes. And if you wanted to kind of add a note in, and you could set different velocity amounts just by going directly on the note. So you could set 3 different velocity amounts directly there. You can also remap the notes. So you say, okay, I want this, what's coming in as a D1 to be mapped out to a different sound. So kind of like the built-in drum editor found in Cubase, and again, you could have different swing options, and you could say, okay, I want this to be more for like 8th note triplets or 64th notes, 32nd notes. You can have different kind of velocity scaling here. And if you want to add more swing, and again, if you say, okay, I really like this particular drum pattern that I've created, and this will automatically kind of sync in the same kind of mode. So you have your different restart mode, each note follow the transport. So if you just want to program a quick drum pattern, you can now even just drag and drop that pattern here directly into your timeline. So again, kind of really great drag and drop capability that you're going to have, and kind of true integration. So I could just take that and drag and drop it directly onto my timeline, so I can kind of see all of my different windows and how everything is laid out. So if you wanted to be able to program drums, again, you don't have to necessarily go to another edit window. You can have all of your drum patterns just synchronized directly here. So we'll go ahead and take a look at our next tool that's really handy, that's a great MIDI modulation, is going to be one of the MIDI editors. It's going to be called a flex phraser. And we could think of this as being a very kind of sophisticated arpeggiator. So if I wanted to come here, I'll just kind of select this sound, and so when we go to our MIDI modulation, we can see kind of the whole hierarchy laid out for us here. So I can see my flex phraser. So, and a lot of arpeggiators, like some of the ones that we saw before, are kind of just doing up and down and different variations on that. So if I wanted to come here, I'll just kind of play just some basic chords that you could see in the interface window. So instead of just playing, if I bypass the flex phraser and just play a chord, it's not very interesting. But now I could come here and do some stuff like, okay, as I play the same chord, and again, I could add different swing feels. I could say, okay, let's make this more 16th note triplets. And I could also restrict the range. I could also restrict the polyphony. But what's really interesting is this recording option. So if I just click here and just hit some notes, I'm just going to hit some chords. So now that I've done that, I can just hit the record button again, and then everything that I just recorded, I could just drag and drop, and that actual performance is now just been recreated and captured so that it can play back directly into your sequence. So, but what's really interesting about the Flex Phraser is the ability for it to actually mimic other instruments. So if I wanted to come here, I could actually select a quick guitar voice, and I'll just again play a basic chord here. And let me just go ahead and set this up so we can hear it. All right. So I'm going to go to, say, my nylon guitar here, and we'll make sure that just going to get my octave set correctly here on my controller keyboard. I'm just going to adjust the tempo up a little bit here. So let's say I want the tempo to be around. So right now you can look at your Flex Phraser, and you could have different, bass. You could have different guitar voicings for classic. So it's not just limited to just doing simple up and down. You could actually have organ licks, string licks, as well as brass run, string run. So all these different arpeggiators. So we'll show you just kind of an idea how you can use some of these different arpeggiators. So I'll start off with just, and I'll just do this with my on-screen keyboard here, my virtual keyboard. So as we play, so I have a nylon string guitar, and let's say I wanted to add maybe like a electric guitar. And now we'll add maybe more of a funky Stratocaster. And I could just come here and adjust the volume of each of these and the panning. And let's say another acoustic guitar. And hit the voice again. And maybe even an organ lick here. So I'll add the organ. Let's say I want to have bass coming in. And let's say even now drums. And we could adjust our tempo here. And now if I switch chords, so whatever chord I just enter in, I'm just using my QWERTY keyboard. So very, very easy to kind of, if you're doing kind of a live situation, to the point where you could actually just kind of play all of your different instruments and have all your different arpeggios kind of lined up, and you could do kind of a one-man band if you really wanted to. So you can, again, just have kind of hundreds of different variations. And for those people that have worked with, like, the Yamaha motif, they have very similar, kind of very sophisticated arpeggios. These are many of the same arpeggios that have been kind of, tried and tested in, Yamaha keyboards, and, being part of the Yamaha family, we're going to have access to all those different sounds. So it gets to be kind of really pretty cool what you could do with all the different arpeggiators. So even if you don't play organ, or you don't play clavinet, or you can't really perform a string part on a keyboard if it's not your primary instrument, you could just kind of do this, and again, record it in, and at that point be able to just, drag and drop the part directly on your timeline, or just automate it and have all those different elements kind of happening at once, just from hitting, a couple of notes on your computer QWERTY keyboard like I was doing. So the flex phraser, we could think of it as kind of a very musical, but you can think of it as a very musical arpeggiator on steroids. It's kind of practical, and you could have multiple flex phrasers going on simultaneously. So it gets to be very, very easy, very powerful to work with. Now, one of the things that we want to do is also, if we have drum loops, which are pretty popular to work with, I'm going to come right over here and we can say, okay, let's just take our drum loop. Let's say we'll take kind of a generic sounding drum loop here. And to make sounds in HALion, it's very easy because you can just literally just drag and drop directly from your project window into HALion. So I'm just going to drag that. And now at this point, we could see kind of our sample mapping. So I could say, okay, I just want to take this and so you may notice that the pitch and the tempo changes. So the root key by default will be C3. But if I wanted to actually kind of, edit the sound, I could come directly over here and we could actually have, different ways of doing, so if I wanted to take the sample, one of the great things is you could actually just choose to slice up the sample. And as we slice the sample, we could do it kind of based on transients or by the grids as well. So, or you could do kind of a combination of both. So I'm just choosing my transients here. Now I could apply. So I see my single drum loop audio file right here. So at this point, I could just take this and then I'm going to hit apply. And what's going to do is it's automatically going to break down each of those particular slices. So each slice is now its own MIDI file. And if you wanted to do, all sorts of, different kind of drag and drop, I can now take that MIDI file and route it directly onto my project. So say I'm going to put this onto B14 MIDI channel. So I'll just put this on B14. And now at this point, I have created that exact drum loop, but it's now each of the elements directly here in the MIDI domain. So if I wanted to just literally kind of flip notes around and be able to kind of change my different parts, I'm able to just come here and just, use my arrow keys on my computer keyboard. And that way I could actually take different drum loops, be able to slice them up and be able to kind of treat them as individual MIDI events. And then you could also do stuff like I want to take this and reverse this or run it through different filters. So you have all sorts of different options for taking audio. Now, one of the things that you could also do is just go to, your audio warp settings. So if I wanted to come here, we could actually go back into audio warp mode. So if I go to my edit to zone, we could enable audio warp and we could choose this for solo or for music instruments. So now if I wanted to take that drum loop and have it on different pitches but be the same timing, whereas before you notice that as the pitch got higher, the sample got faster. With audio warp, we could make sure that the length is maintained on all of the different samples. So it gets to be very comprehensive for working with drum loops or building drum beats or working with world instruments or classic instruments like the Haliotron or the Model C organ. So we could do all sorts of very creative things with that. Now, one of the things that sets apart HALion from every other sample on the market, every other sampler on the market, is going to be this concept of a VST expression. And this is something that we could do kind of inside of Cubase with VST 3.5 instruments. So this is kind of open to everyone in the market, but most of our companies haven't really had the option to kind of take advantage of it, or they haven't chosen to take advantage of it, rather. So if I were to play, let's say, a brass part like this, So that's often how a keyboard player would perhaps play a brass part, but it's not necessarily how a brass player would play it. So one of the things that is kind of a limitation of MIDI, and we have to remember MIDI was originally conceived of, and I think the first iteration came out in 1982. So it's been 32 years. But one of the limitations gets to be that we actually, when we're dealing with controller information, such as volume or modulation or pitch bend, panning, some basic MIDI messages, that they're only applicable to every single note on the channel. So, they apply to everything that's on the same MIDI channel. So if I had a drum program where one track was, bass drum and then maybe snare, then hi-hat, tom, cymbals, percussion, say on 5 different tracks, but they're all assigned to the same MIDI channel. And if I wanted my kick drum to be louder or my snare to be softer, as soon as I would adjust the volume of one of those, because they're all on the same MIDI channel, they would all be globally set. But now we have the capability with VST 3.5 to actually have instruments that don't have that limitation. And this is what we call note expression. So if I wanted to come here, I could take this brass part. Now I'll take my modulation wheel off. Sorry about that. All right, so we'll listen to it one more time here. So if I wanted to take one particular note here, I could double click on it and I could choose what type of controller, and I want this to be based on the note value at the note level. So I'm going to grab my volume control here. At this point, I could just draw in different volume messages. So I can say, okay, let's have that high note of the brass just automatically go down and then crescendo louder. Or I want this note, instead of it going down, to say, okay, I want that note to get louder there, and I want the low note to get a little louder faster. Let's say just because of the frequencies involved. So just come here. And let's say if I wanted to have other MIDI events, I could say, okay, let's adjust panning. So I want this note, and we could actually put this into like a one-shot mode. And I can say, okay, I want panning, and I want this note, even though it's on the same MIDI channel as the others, we can say, okay, I want that to be panned to the left, and we'll pan this in the opposite. So I'll just come here. We'll set that to one shot. So now, and I wanted to take my tuning here, and I could just now draw in like pitch bend on one particular note. So I'll take off one shot mode here. So now when I play back this little brass part, you have control with the VST expression, where you could actually create, and have MIDI be a lot more expressive and more musical, so you don't have to split everything into different MIDI channels. So if you're trying to kind of replicate the subtle nuances of like how real string players play, how a real brass section plays. So if you're trying to mimic those for different film composition purposes, the note expression is just, a really great thing. Or within a synthesizer, you could have a filter just on one note and not applied. So within HALion 3, it has the VST 3.5 support, so you have the note expression. So you could be kind of, a lot more expressive with your MIDI data than you can using any other sampling tool with that. So it can make a big difference in how your parts come across, and it saves you kind of a lot of workarounds that for those of us who have been doing sequencing, trying to mimic like real musicians for a long time, and how how tough that can actually be. So that really kind of makes it so much easier. I'll just kind of circle back, and I'll just see if we have any questions before we go on. We'll show you how to kind of make some of your own samples. So I see a couple of questions on Groove Agent about CPU performance. One of the things that you could do is if you go into the options page is you could actually kind of set more of the samples to be kind of streamed from the hard disk versus memory. So sometimes, people load up, tremendous amount of samples, like, 4 gigs of samples on big kits. So make sure that you actually kind of adjust the performance streaming options in Groove Agent 4, and that can make a big difference with kind of your performance with Groove Agent. Okay, I'm just seeing if we had any other quick questions before we move on. Okay, I think the little warning just meant that I didn't have it routed in the rock organ part, so it just wasn't being routed out to the right output. All right, so one of the things that is great with HALion is how you can actually build samples. So I'm going to start from a brand new instance of HALion here, where we have kind of nothing loaded up, and we'll kind of build a base sample. One of the things I wanted to do, I'll just go ahead and we'll delete this layer here, so we'll start from scratch. And one of the things that I want to do, my instrument is I play bass, and I always wanted to have an instrument that, or a bass sample, and it's always whatever your kind of, actual instrument is. Obviously, the samples are terrible and everything else is great. It's one fact that hasn't really changed in many years. But one of the things that I'm very cognizant of when I'm recording or performing is, especially on electric bass, and you see it on guitars as well, is the voicings, like where you actually play notes. So if I played an open G on the G string versus the 5th fret on the, on the D string versus the 10th fret on the A string, or on the 15th fret of the E string, that would give you a significant amount of tonal difference. And a lot of times you may choose a particular voicing for an instrument so that it's going for a particular sound. So I didn't like any bass samples because I couldn't really choose whether I was on the E, A, D, or G string. So if I wanted to see, I see Albert's question about modulating. We'll get to that in just a couple minutes. But if I wanted to kind of be able to switch and choose my particular sounds, we could do this. Now, to start off, we just need to actually create a program. So you see kind of your program tree here, and if you click here, you could also see your undo history. So if I wanted to grab my program tree, I could just drag it in, and we have a program. So I'm just going to go ahead and we'll give it a name. So we could just kind of right-click here, and we'll rename it, and we'll just call it Jazz Bass. Okay, and what I've done in this example is actually gone through and said, okay, I wanted to have, I recorded every single note on every single string on every fret. And I've labeled it like E, G1, the E string, G sharp 1, E string, A1, B flat 1, etc. So I'm going to select all of these files, and I'll just hold down, I'll just select these, and I have these into different folders for each of the strings. So I just kind of made a template, so if I want to do more sampling, I could do that. So I'm going to drag this, all the files, onto the program. And as I do that, I could actually, we're going to get the key range from the sample file, and we're going to get the root key from the sample name and the sample file. So these are usually kind of the default settings. So I'll just kind of hit OK. And now when I wanted to come here, I go to Edit, and I could see these all on my mapping page. Now, if I have this window selected, you could zoom in and out just by hitting the G and H keys like you do in Cubase. So now I have these all set up. And as we mentioned before, we're going to have program zone layer, or program layer zone. So I wanted to actually kind of create this as kind of an independent layer. So what I want to do is I'm going to create a new layer here. Just undo that. And I want to set kind of this level. I'm going to select the name here, and I'll go ahead and just rename it. And we're going to add our layers. I want to add a layer for each string. Okay, so I'll just come back up here. And once you're in kind of the program tree level, you could also use the arrow keys to go up or down. And let's say I'll just make 2 layers just so I can have them. 2 additional layers. All right, and I want to call this one, let's say E string. And the next layer, we'll call it A string. And D string followed by the G string. So I want to now take these samples. They're all from my E string. At this point, I will just drag it, and now it's right mapped out onto my E string layer. Now, if I wanted to audition these, now if I wanted to edit the sample, like let's say maybe I hear a little bit of a click here on the low E, all I had to do is select that sample, and then I could click on sample right here. At this point, I could just kind of zoom directly in. I can see that where this actually recorded was just a little bit after the initial attack. So I'm going to just grab that start point of the sample to right before that clip right there. Now, if I wanted this, since I only had a 4-string bass that I was sampling, and if I wanted this to kind of mimic what a 5-string bass would do, I could come here, and I could take that 1 E sample, and we'll zoom in just a little bit here. And this one. So I will just kind of drag the low key down to B. All right, so now those are all of my different E string samples. So now also, if you wanted to, one of the options that you have here is to actually edit samples in an external wave editor. So I have this set up for WaveLab. So if I wanted to actually do my sampling here, at that point I could just say, okay, let's just take this, and then as I'm in the sample editor, I could right click and I'll just say, let's open in an external editor, and this will automatically open up WaveLab. At that point, I can see my sample directly there. I could do my edits, and as I just make my edits directly here, it's automatically updated directly into HALion as well. So we have our E string. So we're going to do this as a sample. Now, if I wanted to, we could start off with our samples as synthesis, which we'll take a look at, or my grain oscillator, my organ oscillator. So now if I wanted to come here, we could just say, okay, I'm going to select my mapping page. And another way to get the samples in is I'm just going to drag all from my A string here. At this point, we'll just, we'll just zoom in and out of here just a little bit. And I'm going to select my second layer, my A string layer. And as I do this, you may notice that these samples are still visible. But I could right click and go to my visibility options. At this point, I could say auto visibility. So if I have my E string layer done, I can see that. But if I have my A string layer selected, I don't see anything because I don't have anything on that layer. So I'm going to drag all these samples over. So we're going to say, okay, we want this to start on the A. So you see I can put all the samples onto one key if I wanted to and have their velocity levels automatically done, or I could just simply come here and put them all onto one single key. So in this case, I have one sample, and if I wanted to have multiple velocity levels, I could just simply, take all these samples and drag it down so we see our velocity vertically, our pitch horizontally. So now if I come here, and this is actually playing both of the samples from the E string and the A string. I want to now select my D string, and we'll take this sample here. At this point, we'll start it on D2. Again, drag and drop. So if I was doing like drums, I may want to put multiple velocities on a single drum sound. All right, and we'll select our G string at this point, and we'll select all these samples. All right, so as you move up vertically here, we can just say, okay, I want to take. All right, and if I messed up, like I just did, and one of the things is you have multiple levels of undo. I think it's like 20 levels. I could be mistaken on that. So, but you have kind of an undo history here. Okay, so let's say I just want to put it on the right samples notes here. So I'm just going to zoom. And this is where you could actually kind of change the size of your particular, sounds, and you could set up screen sets that are really kind of very well attuned to this. So we're going to now select our G string layer here. So we'll just look. Okay, so we want to start on G2. Okay, so now I have my different layers here, and what I want to do is as I go to different ranges, you may hear kind of multiple notes, and again, playing on the different strings. So I want to be able to switch between those layers. So I'm going to come here, and for each of these, I'm going to add what's called a mega trig. And a mega trig sets up different conditions for switching between our different samples. So what I want to do is you click on, we're going to add a new MIDI module. And I'm going to say we're going to add, and this is where we could add like a drum player, a MIDI player, the flex phraser. So if I wanted to, I can now just choose my mega trig. And we'll go to my MIDI modulation. And I can say, okay, I want it to be a MIDI note on. And when that note does it, I want it to set it up for a key switch. So at this point, I want it to be C0. And I want this to be C0 for my range. And we see that this key actually changes color, and that indicates that there's a key switch. So I'll go to my next, to my A string. And what this basically is telling the program to do is when you hit a key switch to change. So in this case, when I hit a note on, I want it to perform a key switch. So in that note on, I want the key switch to be set to D0. and then that will play that layer. So now as I wanted to come here, we'll go down to our D string. And again, we'll just add our MIDI module, our mega trig. So I could set up, like, if I wanted different pickups, I could say, okay, play, when I hit this note, play this particular, play the back pickup, or play both pickups. So that way you could switch between all of your different sample layers. So we're going to say this will be E0 and E0. And we'll set up the last key switch here. And again, you could just come here. And you could do these with keyboard shortcuts as well, but just for demonstration purposes, we're just going to have this so you can follow it a little easier. So now we get to the mega trig, and we want this to be F0. So we turn this on. Set key switch. So now I could see that when I play notes, I hit this note, it's playing on the E string. So if I hit this G versus this now would trigger that G on the A string, or if I want it on the G string. Now I could save this program right here, so I'll just click right here, and we could could open up programs there, but if I click just to the right of that, we can save this program. So I'm just going to call it we'll call it a jazz bass here. So now at this point, I could also put in some additional metadata. So if I wanted to come here, you could add additional metadata, so you could have it show up as a particular instrument. So if I wanted to, like, if I could see my graphic pictures, I could say it's clean, it's an electric bass versus a synth bass, stuff like that. So if I wanted to add a MIDI track, now since we've added all of our different key switch information, and I come here and I say, let's route this out to HALion on channel 1, port A, where I have the jazz bass sample loaded up. I go to my expression map, and now I could import the key switches automatically from that track. So I can see that when I hit C0, that's going to send to the E string, D0 to the A string, E0 to the D, and F0 to the G string. So at this point, when I go to create a MIDI track, I could see if I have my different notes drawn in here, I could actually choose that this is coming from the A string, this is coming from the D string, it goes to the G string here, and it's on the E string after this. So all of our kind of articulation mapping. So this is how a lot of times you can get very kind of detailed instrumentation for, when you're dealing with string samples, which we'll look at in just a couple of minutes. So that's how you could kind of make your own samples, but you can just drag and drop samples, or directly from your tree right here, you could just import and export all your different samples. If you have different third-party sample libraries like old Emu or Kai libraries, or those can be imported from their CDs as well, so you could have all those samples directly on your device. So really handy. I have like all of my Emu, my Kurzweil library, all kind of imported and directly put into HALion format. Now, if I was starting from scratch and I wanted to do maybe more of a synthesizer, I could come here, we'll drag an empty program, and then we go to our sound. So I say, okay, let's edit, and then we could go to our zone. So we could actually kind of have and I could choose here whether I want it to be a synthesizer zone, a sample zone, the grain oscillator, or an organ. So real quick, if I say, okay, let's make it an organ sound, I could just come here, and again, we could just say, okay, let's just go to, you could look at some of your different options and say, okay, let's go to our zone. And now at this point, you could just say, okay, let's go to our sound zone. You could go to, the trigger notes, variation groups, and again, when you kind of come over here, you could just say, okay, let's just grab the new organ sound. Or if I say, okay, let's just make it a synth zone. So at this point, we could say, okay, we're going to go to our sound. And again, we could say, okay, let's go to, and again, you could have your different programs, triggers, voice management. But if I wanted to, I could actually just choose my different zones here as well. So I'm going to start off by adding a new zone. So, and once we have that, if I go to my organ, I can see my organ oscillator. So as I play a particular note, I'm going to open up my virtual keyboard. And we don't hear anything initially because you might have to and I'm just going to have a MIDI track routed to channel 2 here. So as I would play back, and I'll just make this a little louder so you can hear. So I want to build up and these are basically like your organ drawbars. At this point, if I wanted to add an effect, I could just right click here and say, okay, I wanted to add a different effect. So I can say, okay, let's just add a rotary effect. So at this point, you could just kind of go down and now add your rotary effect. If you wanted to edit that sound, again, now you could just come. Or if you wanted to add another effect of the guitar amp, we can now just come again right over here. Or if you want tape saturation, the amplifier section, so you can say, okay, I want it to be more of a crunch sound. So you can just kind of add in your different elements here. So if I say, okay, I want it to start off with a synthesizer sound, I could come right here to my synth patch. At this point, we start off with our different oscillators. So I'll just kind of redo this program here. So I'm just going to delete this program, and we'll just go ahead and delete our patches. So we'll start off with, again, we'll say we're going to add a zone. So this is, again, the fundamental building block. We say a synthesizer. So we could have, again, our oscillator section directly here. We could set our pitch bend amount up and down, our tuning here. So if I wanted to have a different oscillator, so we can start off with a single oscillator here. And this is kind of the, the fundamental aspects of synthesis sound. Like I said, okay, I want it to be a sine wave, a triangle wave, a saw sync. So you could also, so let's say I want it to be a saw for this oscillator. I could also add kind of a multi-oscillator to make it sound a little thicker. So let's say I want that to be a triangle, and this one I want to be saw, and I could blend those two amounts. And let's say another, let's do something, and let's add a sub oscillator. So you can kind of blend your different, you're going to add a ring modulator and maybe a noise generator. And you can choose different noise shapes. And now we kind of go through our filter section. So we can say, okay, I wanted to have what different types of filters. I can have a classic filter, and you can have different kind of filter. So probably a really terrible sound. And you also can have kind of your amplifier section. If I wanted to have effects, we can now come directly here to our mixer. So we have kind of our mixer section that can have outputs. We could also add different auxiliary sends, and if you click, you'll see right to the right here. So in this auxiliary send, I have 8 effects, and let's say I just wanted to add a bit of delay. So I could come right over here and add a multi-delay. And then when I go back to my edit sound, I can say, okay, let's come here. Or if I wanted to add chorusing, I could, again, come here to my mixer section, go to aux send to, and say I wanted this to be flanging. So at this point now, as soon as I go, and I could edit the effect as well. So anytime that you click on your particular sound, you can edit that particular effect. So I could now just come here and say, okay, aux send to. So you can just kind of add, and again, you could route your effect sends to different outputs if you want one of the 32 outputs. Here you could adjust the envelope. So, and again, you have different choices. So you could have for filters, for pitch, or user settings. So one of the most typical envelope settings would probably be for, if I wanted to kind of fade in. And you could just kind of come here and adjust kind of the shape of the envelope. So if I wanted more attack, or if I wanted the attack to fade in. At this point, you could also open up your LFO section. So you can say, okay, now I want to be able to take the waveform here. You could change the shape of the LFO, the frequency of your LFO. And if you want to have 2 different LFOs, you could do that there. This could then be fed into your step modulation matrix. So, and at this point, what's kind of interesting, if you just kind of choose, we could go down, and then you could have your modulation matrix. So at this point, you could say, okay, I want it LFO1 to change the pitch. I want it LFO2 to change the resonance, and I wanted, LFO1 to change here the cutoff. So at this point, you could do very complex modulation matrices as well. So you can kind of really shape your own sound very powerfully. Now, if I wanted to add another zone here, so let's say I just will start a brand new zone, I could say, let's just add an organ oscillator to that existing zone. And at this point, I could say, let's just grab this. And I could say, okay, let's just grab the envelope here, and I wanted that to be. So at this point, you could kind of keep building different sounds, layering multiple sounds together. So when you go to, like a lot of times when you first start up HALion, the first patch you see is one called HALion City. So if I just wanted to come here, we'll choose all of our instrument sets, and then I'll just type in HALion City. And this is a good patch to kind of figure out exactly, because this is actually comprised of multiple sources. So when I play this one patch here, HALion City, you can see that it's going to be, not only do we see kind of the trigger, the flex phraser, so we're going to see that arpeggiation. We're going to have the Auron synthesizer layered with the trium, and again layered with the voltage synth. So if I just want to take each of these elements, and we could choose to kind of mute the different elements here in our program tree. So now I can say, okay, let's just take this, and we're going to have, as we play, just the Auron synth. And when I come here and I could edit, and you can see the macro view, you could actually switch between the different instruments here. So now if I just play that, that's just the Auron. And now we could add the trium. And now we could add the voltage. So if you wanted to, you could have your different layers. I see a question about volume. So if you wanted to, you could just add different buses here. So if you wanted to add a bus, you're able to do that for that. But you could control a tremendous amount directly from right here. So just taking that one sound, and again, if I say let's look at what's going on in voltage, we can now just take this and go to edit, and let's go to the zone. At this point, we can see all these different components. So we see two different oscillators, filters, the amplifier section, and here's where you could have your aux ends if you're using your amplifier section, going into your LFOs, into the step modulation, and your modulation matrix. So we can have the LFO3 being fed into bus 1, bus 2, bus 3. So at this point, you could see how one sound can be using elements of all those different sounds. And if I wanted another layer that was just going to be my bass sample, we're able to do that as well. So it's very powerful for making your own sounds. But, the nice people at Steinberg have been great and have gone through a lot of this process. So you can kind of go through and kind of tweak existing sounds, or if you wanted to make your own from scratch, it's really super easy and powerful. Now, the last thing we'll look at is going to be kind of using it with different, in kind of an orchestral setting. And we saw how we could do some of the key switching capabilities with doing like on the bass. But if I wanted to kind of take this for an orchestral session, one of the things that's very powerful is, and this is why a lot of film composers really adore Cubase, because it used to be like your key switches were always just treated as MIDI notes. But as we kind of look at our different key switches here, and if I go to my expression maps, and we could set these up in MIDI. So if I go to my violin part, I could actually just see my violin, all these different articulations. So basically there's samples of whole tone trills, spiccato, half tone, tremolo, pizzicato, espressivo, legato, portamento down, portamento up. So I could have all these different controls. So when we go ahead and we'll just kind of take a listen to some of it. And this is actually, all these sounds are coming from the HALion Symphonic Orchestra, which is, you can actually, used to be only done as an upload from a trial version. But now you could actually just purchase it from the Steinberg online shop as well. So we'll just kind of let you listen to it just a little bit here. So if I wanted to take the violin and kind of change, because, to mimic what real musicians sound like, we're able to kind of, be able to switch intelligently between those different samples. And all of this is going through, and, one of the cool things is you actually have the built-in convolution reverb as well as one of your effect choices. So if I wanted to come here, I'll just double click and we'll go to our violin part. And as I listen, and we'll just solo the violin so we could just hear it here. So we'll just start off. So let's say for those, looks like some 16th note runs there, maybe 32nd notes. So I just wanted to switch that. So I'm going to select those notes, and I could actually record it with the articulation mapping, where I could just kind of change it after the fact. So I'll just come here, and let's say I want to start off with legato. So I could see legato here. So I'll just grab my pencil tool and say, okay, let's start with legato. And then for these selected notes, I want those to be more spiccato, so kind of more separated. So we'll just come here and say, okay, we'll make those spiccato. And then going right back to legato for this note. So now it'll just kind of change. And let's say for these notes, I want it to actually just be pizzicato. So just select my pencil tool here. And then immediately back to legato. So this way I could actually, I'm not using MIDI notes. So when I go to look at this part in my notation editor, let's say we'll switch over to page mode here. I can actually not only see the articulations that have been created from our key switches. So if we made our own samples, all those key switches automatically can carry directly over into your notation view. So we could actually have your expression map here. We could enter it in notation view and have it automatically correlate to our key editor, but everything can be just controlled here. But I don't see all of my key switch notes that are actually controlling all of like that are going to show up like at a really low note here that would kind of mess up my notation. So this way we could actually manage all of the articulations. And if you have a number of different sample libraries, there's VST expression maps that are done that you could download from the Steinberg website, or any of the sounds in HALion, they're automatically carried over, so you don't have to sit there and worry about that. So if you could just simply import the key samples, and it's going to take all of the key switches and be able to manage that. So, it's a great time saver for dealing, being able to make something sound much more realistic. So even like the first one, we'll just listen to the violins, what a difference that'll make just putting it on a spiccato sound as we play. So, it's a really great orchestral library that's pretty efficient, and it's, $99 in the Steinberg online shop. So, not only do you kind of have just a plethora of sounds, Steinberg kind of uses it as the sample playback and synthesis engine. So it's kind of like the mothership for all the great sounds that you get inside of, Steinberg programs like Cubase or the Nuendo NEK. It's the playback engine that's used for the Grand, for Groove Agent 4. But, if you wanted to have a wide variety of sounds in different genres, whether it's bebop stuff or a mellotron or an organ or world instruments, or if you want to have like very complex synthesizers, if you wanted to have, the ability of kind of constructing and deconstructing loops, to be able to take the flex phrasers, so you could have really complex arpeggiators that are very musical and actually play licks for you. If you wanted the ability to have the VST expression so that each note can have its own independent controllers for things like, resonance or cutoff or volume, panning, tuning, it's the only sampler is going to offer that capability. Plus, if you wanted to create your own sounds, whether it's starting from synthesis, whether it's starting from a granular synthesizer like the Auron and taking a simple sound like a piano and making it something really interesting and combining that with the organ oscillator, combining that with your own samples for bass or drums or mandolin or a door hit, whatever, and being able to kind of create a sound based on all those and have all the capabilities, whether you want to, combine all those into one single patch and run it through different arpeggiators that are tempo synced, that are working musically with you, to whether you want to do everything for orchestral session as well, by again having other content libraries that are available from the Steinberg online shop. So if you wanted the full orchestra, you get the HALion Symphonic Orchestra. I think it's $99. If you wanted like amazing Fender Rhodes, you could get the Neo Soul keys. If you wanted additional expansion kits, like, you know, as we see, like the Trip synthesizer that comes in Cubase 7.5, that's automatically kind of all playing back through these sounds. If you just want a lot of great, amazing sounds and you don't really want to tweak and create your own sounds, you could get HALion Sonic. If you wanted to be able to kind of really spend time and sculpt and create your sounds, and if you're doing sound design work, HALion 5 is a really compelling software tool, and we've really just kind of scratched the surface, and, you know, we've been going about almost about 2 hours now. So I hope you guys have found this helpful. Any questions? So we'll see, just kind of go through some of the comments here. We'll see if you guys have questions. We'll just take a quick look as I was kind of go back, read through some of the comments. All right, so I'm seeing a question about drones, loops, samples. So yeah, I mean, you can play back any length of audio file from the, you know, from HALion. So just as long as it fits on your hard disk. So see if there's other questions. Let me see if I can find an amplifier section here real quick for Albert. He had asked. Let me just load up a new patch here. I think it's in the zone. Or maybe it's in the sound page here. All right, any other quick questions? All right, we'll wrap up in here in a couple minutes. Hope you guys have found this helpful. As you can see, and I think that there's a HALion 5 trial version. So if you guys aren't running it, you could definitely kind of check it out and try it out. I think it's kind of not the full range of content that comes with it, but it's a good sampling of the different content that comes with it. So we'll see if there's any more last minute quick questions, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up. I'd like to thank you guys. Sorry about the sometimes the first Google Hangouts, sometimes the audio doesn't work for some reason and you have to kind of start a new one. So I appreciate everyone's understanding with that. Hope everyone found this kind of helpful. All right, I'll wait just another minute, and we'll see if anyone else has a quick question, and we'll go ahead and wrap up. I'd like to thank you guys for checking us out. We will be doing another Google Hangout later in the month. So that will be kind of more of a general Q&A. And if you have questions on that you'd like to submit or topics that you want covered, please feel free to kind of go to the YouTube channel and send those in. So we'd be happy to kind of cover any of the topics, but if you send them in advance, it's always helpful. But, and again, we're just here to kind of help you guys out. Hope, again, this is helpful. And we'll go ahead and wrap up in just a minute. We'll just see if there's any last minute questions. Yeah. All right, and we'll go ahead and wrap up. Thank you guys for watching. Hope everyone found it helpful, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Probably be maybe the week before Thanksgiving, maybe early in that week, and we'll do kind of the hangout there. So again, if you have topics you want covered, feel free to go ahead and ask questions and send them in, and we'll be happy to kind of go through all your topics. Thank you very much. Have a good night.